Yeah. Okay, we can start. So, any questions on previous class? Okay. Okay. So, today we are going to discussing about how SQL joins versus data step merge. So, because in previous class, in a couple of sessions back, we discussed about the combining the data sets. So, in the combining data set, we use one-to-one merging or many-to-many merging or match merging is there. So what is the major difference between the data step merge and SQL join? So whenever you see that both will give the same results, the results will be same. Okay, depending upon what type of join that you are using. If you use the both SQL and data step, both will give the same results. Okay, but performance wise, like a calculation wise, whenever like the things you have to check it. Okay, but in couple of scenarios the SQL join is more efficient, and couple of scenarios data step is more efficient. Okay, so why SQL joins are more efficient means you don't need to sort the data before joining any two data sets. You should not you don't need any sorting kind of data required. Even if the data is not sorted directly, you can join two data sets by using the proc SQL. But when it comes to the data step, if the data is not sorted, you cannot join the two data sets. That is a one difference between the data sets. Okay, and and when depending upon the size of the data, suppose if the data is very huge, like in both, if the tables are like more than 100 MB or 500 MB or 1 GB files, but both the data sets are more than 1 GB, in those cases SQL is more efficient because it does not require any sorting and it does not require anything like that. And after joining also you can get the sorted results, but in the data step, before joining you need the sorting, after joining you need to sort it. Okay, so that's one of the thing majorly different. And if the data sets are very huge, the SQL is more efficient than data step. If the data sets are small, then you can directly go to the data step merge, then you can do that. So join do not require sorted index tables, same name. And one of the thing is in merge in a data step, the column name in both the data sets should be same. Like here if I have X, there also you have X. But in SQL, the column name is not mandatory, same. So equal to same name column in a join expressions, like equality into join expressions, like this. So is usually more efficient than SQL when it comes to small tables. When it comes to the large table, SQL is more efficient. Yeah. So that's the major difference between the SQL and join. So those, but end of the day, the results will be same. Maybe the data based on the size of the data, the processing time, the query execution time will be more, but otherwise the data is same. Okay. So the next topic that we are going to discussing is set operators. So what is mean by set operators? So till now we discussed about the data joining horizontally, side by side. With the set operators, we can join the data in vertically, like one after other. Like we can use a set statement in the data step, but here used set operators in SQL. So there are majorly four different set operators, so like intersect, except, union, union all, and outer union. So there are four: except, intercept, union, like union, outer union. These are the four different operators. So on all the four operators majorly used, the data will be combined one after other. A set operator that selects only the unique rows will display one occurrence of the given row in output. Yeah, a set operation in the select statement. So majorly the any operator, any set operator, it will select only unique rows will display one occurrence of the given output. So like by default, it gives the unique rows in both the. Suppose if a particular row is repeated in both the data sets, then output will be given only one row. It means in duplicate data will be deleted automatically. So two groups of query classes. Each group begin with a select class. So whenever you are doing any, whenever going to join the two data sets one after other, you have to use start with the select class in both tables. Select class and the operator and again select class. Select clause first and set operator and another select clause option. So one or both keywords are used. So you can use some other keywords also there to change the meaning of the output. When you're processing a set operation that display only unique rows, like a set operation that contains so proc SQL makes two passes through the data. By default, proc summary eliminates a duplicate. By default, it's remove the duplicates. It's unique in the non-unique rows. So, but if you want to see the duplicate also, there are some, you can also add some modifiers. We can change the output of behavior. So like combining and overlaying, what is the difference between? So what is the combining and overlaying the columns? So out of four, three operators, like select, intersect, union, all the operators combines the column by position, by combining the column and overlaying them. The set operator outer end does not overlay the column. So we can see the difference what exactly the combining and overlaying means. By default, the set operator accept and union overlay the column based on the relative position of the column in the select clause. So whatever the position is there in the both the select statement, based on the column position, the data will be applied. So when columns overlaid, the proc uses column name from the first table. So what is the overlay means? Suppose in the first query, you have the one column name. In the second query, you have the different column name, but the values are same. Are the different values. So those type of column called overlay. Let's see the difference here. Example. The first operator set except to set operator, except operator. You can see all the rows from the first table, and it like when you say except, select unique rows from the first table that are not found in the second table. Okay, so this is how the diagram will like. So overlay column based on the position in the select clause without recording the individual column names. So let's take the example. See XA XB. So as per the definition, select all the rows from the first table, the unique rows again. So when you say specify unique rows, right, out of these two, you'll see only one A and one B, two C, one B, two C. 3V is there, but 4E, 6G. 3V is why it didn't show this means unique rows, which are expect all the rows from the first table, which are not matched there in the second table. So this particular column has been matched in the second table, so that column has been dropped, that row. But here you can see XA, XB. The column names are different here in B. So based on the position, automatically the column will be appended. It overlays the column. This is nothing but overlays. So it is whatever the column is that column will be ignored in the second. Whatever the column they have, so that will be overlaid. So modifying the results to change the meaning of the particular output, you have to use some keywords. Those keywords called all are corresponding. What is the definition of all? When you specify all means it will not delete any duplicate data. Yeah, we can try that one. So it's your question, right? So let's try. It's wrong or not. Let's take these two data sets. We already have 1 and 2. think semicolon is not required. See, you don't see that. So whatever you have it's there also already. So if there is no common data, it's ignored. So you will get the error message. This will be considered two different queries. So whenever you're using the combining the data, you should not specify like this. In this case, there are some other queries. You cannot use that one. So as per the definition, you should not use that one. So you will get error message. Okay. So this is about the union except operator. Change all and modify changing the behavior. So if you specify all, it will not be able to remove any duplicates. So you can see the second column is repeated. So if you specify the corresponding, it means it's based on the column name. If the column name matches, then only those data will be seen here. So this will be so it's a repeated one. It will not be seen in the output. So you can see only 4 and 6. So only column that have the same name. Whenever you specify corresponding, they're only based on the column name which has the same name. Then only it will join it. So this is about the except. If you specify all and corresponding, the output will be changed. So next one is intercept. When you say intercept, opposite to the except, almost like it's common rows in both the data, both the tables. Previously is only first, like it's nothing but it's a inner join in the table level, like it's beside not side horizontally, it's vertical wise. Both the tables which is the common, those data we'll see here. If any duplicates are there, you can see that, but it's don't see the duplicate corresponding. Only the see both the commons we have it. Those will see it. If you say specify all, even the duplicate also you can see that. So the next one is union. So union is majorly regularly we used in a real time union. What is a union means? You're just combining the data. If it's a duplicate or non-duplicate or whatever it may be, it's just combining the data. Even if you have duplicates, it will also combine it. All the data from both the data sets. Now after adding that, you can change the behavior. If you add all, so it will everything will be added. Even if it's non-matching or matching, everything one after other. So previously it is deleted the duplicate data, but here it's not duplicated and all the rows from both the tables. If you specify the corresponding based on the position, based on the column name, it will be appended. So it means that you need to identify the differences between these three operators. Like first one is all the rows from the second table which are not found in the second. You like except intersect means both the data set which are common. Third one is intersect means like union means all the rows from both the tables. You can change the behavior. The next one is intersect outer union. The outer union will see both the data sets. It doesn't. There is no. Whenever you say outer union means it's not changing based on the like combining all things. So it combine both the data sets like with all the columns. XA, XB. Now if you change specify the what criteria corresponding, what is the column is there, common column will have there, non-common different blanks like this. Yeah, so any questions on these four operators? Yeah, so this is one of the example that's a between the data step merge and the proc SQL joins. Yeah, so 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 with the data step, these many different options, these many different ways that you can join the data set. Like whenever you're joining the two data sets, what are the different possible outcomes? You can see this. The first possible outcome is all the data set, which all the records from the first table and matching record from the second table. That is the first option. Now opposite. Third one is both the data set matching records, non-matching records in the from first data set, non-matching record from the second data sets. Next one is all the records, all the data from both the data sets. There is no matching between the two data sets. So these many different way, these many different chances that we can get the different possible output for whenever you're joining the two data sets. But when you go to the data step, you can get all these outputs in one at a time for the two data sets. But when it comes to the SQL, each and every possible outcome you have to write separate query. Like for this kind of output, these are the two tables. Let's say for this kind of output, this is for this particular in data step. This is a one-line statement. But when it comes to the SQL, you have to write this one. You get that kind of output. Similarly here, it means for each and every possible things, we have to write separate query. You cannot do all at a time in one single query. So that is one of the disadvantages with the SQL. Like all the things. So the next one is inline views. So what is mean by inline view? So inline view, nothing but there are two tables. Okay. Sometimes you might want to specify an inline view rather than a table as a source of data for the specific query. An inline view, like let's take the example here. So this is a table. There's two different tables, and you are joining these two tables like this. And whatever the output that you are getting from that particular output, you want to select some data. So this we call as inline view. So this we get an output. From this particular output, you are just selecting which columns you wanted. And so what are the different two tables you're joining based on the output that you're getting? Again, you're selecting the data from that particular, getting the output. So that's we call as inline view. So when subquery is nothing but query within the query. So there are two type of like subquery means inner and outer two queries. Let's take example here. See, this is a sequence query, and here employed. So till here one particular table, one particular select column name from table where and employee ID. This employee ID, so you're just selecting from other table. How you are selecting other table? That in the other table we do have only the employee IDs whose birthday is on February. You want to select only those employed and see the complete information. So whatever the result that you are expecting for outer query depending upon inner query. So this we call as inner query. This we call as a outer query. So this we called as a subqueries. Query within the query. Okay. Yeah. So this is how you can see the data. So correlate and non-correlate subqueries. So whenever you correlated means if the inner query is dependent on outer query, whatever the output query that you are expecting from outer query that is dependent upon inner query, then you can see the correlated subquery. If it's not dependent, then not correlated queries. See, this is a salary. This salary is not depending upon your first query. This is called non-correlated. Yeah. So the next thing is like if you remember that there are a couple of data set options that we have used like skip, drop, like rename, where. So all those data set options can also be used in a proc SQL. This because these data set options at the data set level you can use. After the data set, you have to specify this option. Similarly, you can also use the same option in the SQL also. So because since these are the data set option, wherever you are specifying as input level or output level, this option can be used after the data set. You can open the bracket and specify the variable and close it. Like see, proc SQL, create table. That is example is a table name. In the table name, you have to specify what are the options we have. Then as in select statement. And again here we saw a table from the from class. There you can specify all the data set option if you want it. Yeah, so there are a couple of options also either at SQL level. So this we already discussed in OBS and out OBS and print and no print, feedback and no feedback, and number and name number. So this is just simply displaying the row number in the output. When you say double or not double means between the rows if you want to keep the space more. So these are a couple of options that we can use it. So this is another option called reset. So whenever you use the reset means it's whatever the default values are there, it will be those values. If you specify some option, if you override the existing option, and if you want to go back to the existing option, we have to use a reset. Yeah, this is a into class. I'll explain you that when because this need to be explained when we are discussing about the macros. Okay, let's go to the macros and then we can start with all these things. Yeah, so like SQL. So one of the major important topic is macros in SAS. So this is very useful when in a real time. So in every project, every program, this macros will be used. Because why means if any program that need to be executed multiple times, suppose you have written 1,000 lines of the program. Out of 1,000 lines, there is some part of the code, around 10 lines of the code that you need to repeat every time. Just changing the parameters like this need to be executed one particular state and then same code need to be executed other state. Instead of running the individual states for all the different states individually, just use the macros and create one program and just change the state code, and every way whatever the state you wanted you can specify it and run it. It will be run automatically. So you don't need to write all the 10 lines of code every time. You can write 10 lines of code one time and execute it wherever you need it. You can, whenever you want it, you can use the same code wherever you want it, just change the parameter. So it means the major use of SAS macros is to reuse the code or text some certain number of times. So let's see this. What is the major? The purpose of macro facility is it is a tool for extending and customizing a SAS system for reducing the amount of text that the user must submit to do the common task. It allows you to package small or large amount of text into units that have names. Nothing but so you have some code. That particular code need to be executed certain number of times. So to execute a certain number of times, you have to give some name to that particular part of the code. We call as a package or macro name. So whenever you give the name, call whenever you want. You can just give whatever the name that you are given. You can call that name wherever you want it. So using the macro language, the user can write the program dynamically. So it means whenever if you want to program dynamically, you have to use macros automatically. Okay. Exclusive the macro language enables users to create and resolve the macro variables anywhere in the SAS program. Write a special program that generate the code. So now you got the idea, right? So major purpose of using the macro is to create the program dynamically, and what if you were to reuse the SAS code certain number of times. Not certain, you can a number of times you can use it, but just changing the parameters. It's majorly used to reduce the code while writing the program. So there are two components in the macros. There is a macro processor and macro language. So what is a macro processor? Well, it's a portion of the SAS that does the work, and macro language is whatever the program that you are writing that need to be submitted to the macro processor to execute the code. So it means communicated to the microprocessor. So any questions in this particular slide? So because this is a major thing that why we use the macros SAS. But this macros also like this is about the SAS macros. Similarly, we have VB macros, like Excel macros. Different kind of macros are there. The plan the writing of the program is different. But the purpose is same. Just simply remember that whenever you see anybody calling SAS macros mean to reuse the code. Let's take a simple example. You want to generate the graph. That graph is generated only particular country. Now whatever the program that I have written, that need to be used some other country also, like for the state. So why you need to again same 100 lines of code, right? And run it again one more time for the different state. Instead of running the 100 lines like individually, just automate that code and change the parameter state code wherever you want it and run the same code. Then you will get the same kind of output for the different state. So that's why that kind of things you can usefully here. Yeah, we'll see the examples, then we'll get some idea. So we'll go through those examples. So in this one, there are some automatic macro variables are there. So we have the SAS type macros. In the SAS macros, we have some variables. So these variables are created by user, or some variables are already there in the system. So how we can use those variables? So these variables we call as a system defined user variables, which are already there in the system. So you don't need to write it. Just whenever you want it, you can call those, use those variables, and you can call it and resolve those. So these system variables majorly it's automatically updated in the backend dynamically. So it's not going, you're not going to update, or it's not going to, it's automatically based on your system data, system things. Automatically these values will be updated in the backend. So the first date is sys date. Whenever you say sys date means system date. It means what is your date of your last system. So the format of the date. So if you specify the sys date, it will give the 7 length. If you specify 9, it will give the length of 9. The next one is sys day. Means what is the day of the system. What is the date? Today, like simply nothing but today's day. And the next time sys time, environment, sys time, and sys SCP, like sys version. Whenever you say version means what is the version of the system, like it's a, which what kind of version that you're using in a SAS. What is the job ID? What is the last data set that you have used? What is the test parameter that you have used? So these are the system defined format. These are the only few things it's listed, but we do have few more in the system level. So those are automatically populated in the backend. It's generated, and the values are automatically populated in the backend. You don't see that. All these information, it's there in the SAS dataset automatically. Go to the SAS in the Explorer. Go to the SAS help library. In SAS help library, all these variables, all the information that you can capture. So there is a function called vmacro. In the SAS help, if you click on vmacro nothing but macro view. If you double click it, then you can see all the macro variables here and their values. If you create any new variable, that will also show. If you are not created any variable, by default SAS has created in the backend, that will show here. See, these are automatic macro variables. These are the global macro variables. So just now we see this is date today. What is the date? This date 9. This day. This device. So this MDS and last data set. Title and version, like environment, for worry error text, host name, all the different information you can see. So these are all the information which are there in the system level. So okay, so these are automatic variables, so it's automatically updated these values. When you close the SAS, when you open it, automatically all these variables will be updated. So like this, we do have some other tables that we will discuss in the coming classes tomorrow. But now let's go to the macros here. So these are all the macro variables. It's created by system. This is called as a system defined macro variables. So you can also create your own macro variables. So and what are the all the macro variable? If you want to see that, just use this particular line. So I will discuss it what exactly the percentage put means. So just use percentage put and automatic. So if you run this, you can see what are the all the variable that you have. All those you can see here. Just now we saw v macro, right? All those macro variables which are there in that, those will be displayed here. The value of the automatic macro variable can be displayed in the SAS log by specifying the automatic argument in the percentage put statement. So what exactly the percentage put means, we'll discuss it now. Okay. The next one is this we called as a system defined formats, a system defined user macro variables. Now you can also create your own user macro variables. So whenever you say macro variable, it's nothing but it's a variable. It has given some value, and whenever you are using that variable in a program, the value will be substituted. Like in your basic studies, we'll learn it. Like how you can go to, there are some equation. If you submit the if you substitute some value of this particular variable, you will get some result. Similarly, it's a variable, nothing but it's a parameter value. If you want to submit something, so if you want to substitute some value to that particular parameter, define those parameter and assign the value. That parameter we called as a macro variable. This macro variable, you can, system has created some macro variable, you can create your own macro variable. If you create a macro variable your own, this variable we call as a user defined macro variable. But if the system is created, then that particular variable we called as a system defined macro variable. So we just now we saw all the automatic variable, nothing but system defined macro variables. Now you can create your own macro variable. How you can create a macro variable, that we discuss now. Okay. So user defined macro variable will be created in 5 different methods. Okay, there are the 5 different methods that you can create your user defined macro variables. The first method is percentage let. So when you say percentage let, it means you're creating the variable by using the percentage let statement. Simple. So whenever you are creating a macro variable, it should follow the variable naming convention, basic rule. So you're defining a macro variable and the value, right? So whenever you're defining a macro variable, that should follow the macro variable naming, normal variable naming convention. So variable can be any name of the SAS naming convention. It already exists in the same table. The value will be overwritten. If either variable or the value contain macro trigger, the trigger will be evaluated before the assignment made. So let's see what exactly this means. Let's see it. So percentage let name equal to this one. It means you're creating one variable called name and assigning some value to that. Okay. So percentage let name equal to, it means whenever you want to use this value, then you just use this particular name. So defining is one time and use in number of places. Wherever you want this value, instead of specifying the directly value, you can put under a name instead of number, because this is a defined like this. If you define some other value, automatically the value will be replaced. When you run the second time with a different value, the value what we have the system, it's replaced. And name too, Ramapapa. So similarly with, see, because in each and every macro variable, whatever you are defining will be considered as a text. Each and every letter or space will be considered as a, means all the values that you are defining in the macro variable will be considered as a text. It will not be evaluated anywhere. Let's say same example. So it's let sum equal to 2 plus 3. When you specify like this, it will not do the 2 plus 5 equal to sum. Whatever the value that you have, it will be displayed as easily, like 2 plus 3 only. Okay. It means simply everything will be displayed as a text in the output file. It will not be evaluated or it will not be substituted or anything. Simply display whatever you have in the system defined in the variable. So to define to this list of all the user different variables, if you want to see that, let's say here percentage let x equal to 10. When you run it, it will not give any output because you are defining a variable from x. It has putting some value 10. So this is called a user defined variable, user defined macro variable. So here the macro variable is x and the value is 10. This we call as user defined macro variable. Now just now we see like, right, automatic. Similarly, you can see all the list of user defined variables same, but instead of automatic you just use the user. So then you can see what is the value that you defined, that we can see in the log. User. So this is x equal to 10 that you defined x value and it has 10. So even if you go to the table in v macro, that value you can see here. See that x value you just defined, that value you can see here. So this we called as a user defined variable, and it displayed whatever you are defining macro variable, that will be updated in the v table and it will show that. So this is called as user defined, how to define the user variable and how to show those values. So if you see 2 plus 3, yeah, the storage of the macro variable. So whenever you define the macro variable, how the value will be stored. When the SAS system is invoked, the global symbol table is created and insulates the value of the automatic or user system defined macro variables. Users can also create user defined macro variable by using the percentile let statement that we just saw that. So referencing the macro variable. Now you define the macro variable, right? That variable you want to substitute in your program, use that and substitute the value. So how you can define those macro variable to the program level? It means to substitute the value of the macro variable that you defined, you must reference it. So the macro variable can be reference is made by preceding the macro variable name with an ampersand. So whenever you use the ampersand of the particular macro variable name, and automatically whatever the value that you assign to that particular macro variable will be substituted. So it causes the macro process to search a particular named variable and returns its value if the variable exists. Suppose just now we defined a value x equal to 10. So if you want to substitute this value like percentage let, so I'm giving one more variable and you are referencing your recall the variable. It means whatever the value that you define, then that value will come here and the value will be assigned to the let this value. You can see let here. Now if you use a put statement or if you go to the v macro, yeah, see the value is 10. Whatever the value that you have x, that value is here. Means we are referencing that value of x to the other variable. That means you are calling that value and assigning to the other variable. This means you are referencing with a dollar and substituting the value. Whenever you use a dollar of the macro variable, what will automatically resolve that whatever value that you define. So like this, you can define character numerical. If it's a character, you have to use single quote. You cannot use a single quote. So if you have to use a double quote to resolve that macro variable. So like this. So if you see, this is about the numerical value that you define here. X equal to 10 is a numerical value directly is there. So instead of 10, if we have a, now how you can see this, you have to referencing with the percent x. Whenever you are going to use as a parameter like x, where like when in the code if you use where age is greater than, in those cases we can see, let's take some example here. have defined a variable called x equal to m. Now when I execute, substitute the value. See, here. Okay, it's that's a different one. It's not x, 6. You can see. Okay, the data set class. Okay, data set is not there properly created. Let's take another one. Yeah, here you can see this. Let's look at this data set which is created. What happened? Sorry, because it's not greater than equal to. So 6 is a character variable, right? So let's see all the data that you have m only. It means like this you are going to using this particular macro parameters in the system level or program level. So but if you're using the character variable, suppose if you're defining a macro variable, it's a character, then you are going to using, then you have to use a double quotes. You should not use a single quotes here. So this is how that will be used. Single quote here, single quotes you should not use it. Whenever you are referencing any macro variable, the character values, always use a double quotes. So if you use a single quotes, you will get the error message. So like you will get this kind of message: the word scanner does not recognize the literal encode in the single quotes. So macro variable does not resolve it. Okay. So why these particular variables is important means whenever you are writing the query, whenever you need to substitute some values. Because suppose our aim is the same code need to be repeated, same code need to be executed certain number of times. That need to be whenever you pass some different parameter, the same code need to be executed that particular parameter. Like each state wise, I want to execute the code. So every time you need to write 10 lines of code. Just 10 lines need to be executed one time. Change the parameter wherever you want, wherever you have separate state code. So like this, you can just run it. Okay, these are the just before writing the program macro definition. Just these are the some basic things: creating the parameters, defining the values, and how we can use it. Now we'll go to the program level. Okay, so this referencing of the macro variable, you can do that like this. So like you can combine that macro variable reference with some text. It's like this whole text and macro variable and text macro variable text. Here text means anything in a character value. You cannot like a number or anything, everything you can consider it. If it's a text means like a 1, 2, 3, anything, you can use it. So like this, you can see Y, year and month. Year and month are the year like. So then yes, 90 January, like this text. So this is the example how we can use it. So similarly, name delimiter. So period is a special character that treated as a part of the macro variable reference. Does not appear when a macro variable is resolved. So sometimes what happen, you need to add some other extra dot, because like variable name, like library name dot variable name or dataset name. So you may need to use, instead of library name, you are going to give the parameter in the macro parameter. In the parameter, you are giving some library name. So whenever you are referencing that particular macro variable, you need to consider existing dot is separate and whatever the value that you are putting is a separate, like this. The separate one. Sometimes it's not recognized. You need to use. See, so this is library. Separately, you have to define it and dot. So the first period is treated as a macro variable name delimiter, and the second is simply a text, that existing one. Yes, there are some quoting, macro quoting functions are there. So now you're defining a macro variable, but there are some existing keywords are there. How you are going to define those as a macro variable? Simple example is, so like you are defining m, but I want to put as a semicolon. I want to define I want to define a variable called x. The value is a semicolon. How you are going to do that, right? So I want to create a macro variable with a value as semicolon. So these are similar. Otherwise, you can see greater than or less than. How you are going to do the or LT. So how you are going to define these things means there are some functions are there. By using those functions, you can change the meaning of the particular value. Simply instead of meaning, simply it need to be considered as a text. The first function is percentage str. So whenever you say percentage str, it means that particular value will be considered as only simply text. Even if you specify percentage or anything, it will be considered as a text. Wherever you want to replace, automatically that particular text will be replaced. It will not resolve the meaning. Okay. So like whenever you are going to define these kind of tokens like place, minus, star, these things, I don't want to resolve those things. Whatever the value is that it need to be considered as a text and will display that. Okay, is that clear? Okay. Yeah, the next one is here, it's NRSTR. It's the same type of mistake is there, but it's NRSTR. So what is the meaning of NRSTR? So here we saw the string, but here we see the NRSTR. The NRSTR is majorly used to mask the meaning of these two parameters, these two values. Like if you see, if you want to define some macro variable with an ampersand in the text, and if you want to define the percentage, so to mask the whatever to tokenize the meaning, to mask the meaning of those two characters, because mask the meaning means like whatever the value is there, I don't want to resolve the like what resolve the meaning. It simply need to be considered as a text and substitute the value in the program. In those cases, we used a percentage NRSTR. Percentage STR and percentage NRSTR, these are the two important functions. Majorly, we use the STR only to fix the particular value as a string, even though it's a number or anything. But I want to read it as a text, a string. Then we use a percentage STR. Only for these two scenarios, if you are going to defining like ampersand and star in the data, then we use a percentage NRSTR. So this is example, you can see this. Store one or more statement in a macro variable. See, percentage let program. So this is a PRO is a macro variable name, and in that we have that this is a some need to be considered as a text. But when you see this, it will be considered as a one variable on. It will resolve, like let's see the examples. This one. So if you I just define a macro variable, see, because as per the definition it will be considered here only, but I need to define this variable completely like this particular thing is one line. Now how you can do that? Percentage str, that need to be considered text. Then when you run it, see, you don't see any kind of error message done. See, whatever we have defined, because it contains comma, semicolon. So as it is, you need to display the text. So like it will not going to change the meaning. It will everything will be considered text to display the output. Similarly, he has some other examples here. So another example is like we have the particular name contains apostrophes like this top. Then how you are going to so use the simply percentage str. Okay. So if you're referencing macro variable directly means we use the ampersand. But if you are going to referencing the macro variable indirectly, then use double ampersand. So there can be an indirect reference to a macro variable assigning the macro variable names to other macro. Example, double ampersand city. So you can do that. So the next example is type of the variables. There are other type like, so just now we see that a variable we're calling every time we're calling as a macro variable, right? So these macro variables are the two types like local macro variable and global macro variable. So when you say global and local means simply example. When you say local means within the particular macro, where you started, where you ending. Within that particular macro, if you define a macro variable that we call as a local. Irrespective of the macro, if you define a variable at the starting, that variable we call as a global. It means that variable can be used in any macro. But when you define a macro variable within that macro, can be used only within that one. It means it will be executed only within that particular macro. Cannot go outside that. It's not called as a global. So how we define those local and global? By default, everything will be considered as a global. But if you want to define percentage local, you have to use percentage local and define the variable. What variable you have to use? PROG. Then automatically this variable will be considered as a local, it will be applicable within that particular macro. Okay, yeah, so this is about the macros. We'll start with the programming tomorrow. So tomorrow I'll take some class and we'll take first half of it, and then we'll go to some interview questions like some resume, how it will do that, and what other things we can discuss it tomorrow. So tomorrow is the final class, so we'll close this tomorrow. Okay, yeah, any questions? If you are good, then we'll close today and we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.